He said, "It is perfectly possible for a man to be out of prison and yet not free, to be under no physical constraint and yet to be psychologically captive, compelled to think, feel, and act as the representatives of the national state or of some private interest within the nation wants him to think, feel, and act. The nature of psychological compulsion is such that those who act under constraint remain under the impression that they are acting of their own initiative." That's key. The victim of mind manipulation does not know that he is a victim. To him, the walls of his prison are invisible, and he believes himself to be free. That he is not free is only apparent to other people. His servitude is strictly objective. You see, anyone who's had to deal, anybody here has actually had to deal with psychotic people or schizophrenics or people, it's very difficult to tell those people that their thinking is deranged. They think they're perfectly normal. Partly, as I said, they've adjusted to reality as they see it, so they're not wholly to blame. But even in the worst chronic syndrome, you will find that you're wasting your time. You could roll out your soul like a red carpet, and they'll walk right on it. Because they are thinking you're the dummy. You're the dumbass. You got it wrong. Charles T. Tart called it consensus trance. In short, I would say if it's not in the media, then most people think it didn't happen. Because they don't know what's going on in the other state or whatever. And if you came and told them, they probably think you're a crank and wouldn't believe it. But you put it on CNN and it happened. And conversely, if it did not happen, but is in the media, we believe it happened. The moon landing, for instance, guess what? It didn't happen. Now, Edward Bernays, a master of propaganda and control of the human race, said, "If we understand the mechanism and motives of the group mind, it is now possible to control and regiment the masses according to our will without them knowing it." It's not free and enlighten the masses he's talking about. No. These guys don't want to do anything have anything to do with that. They're busy spending money to control and regiment the masses according to our will without them knowing it. As John D. Rockefeller said, people are yielding themselves with perfect docility to our molding hands. Bernays went on to say, "The conscious and intelligent manipulation of organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in a democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power in our country. We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. We are dominated by a relatively small number of persons. It is they who pull the wires which control the public mind and who harness social forces and contrive new ways to bind and guide the world." Erich Fromm, in his Anatomy of Human Destructiveness, a book I wish everybody would read, "The sick individual finds himself at home with all other similarly sick individuals. The whole culture is geared to this kind of pathology. The result is that the average individual does not experience the separateness and isolation the fully schizophrenic person feels. He feels at ease amongst those who suffer from the same deformation. In fact, it is the fully sane person who feels isolated in the insane society. And he may suffer so much from the incapacity to communicate that it is he who may become psychotic." And haven't we all experienced that? From the time we were born, I assume everyone in this room has experienced that. And I would also say this, that if you are sane enough to see the insanity, that's a damn good sign, because it means you're not insane. So as bad as it is to feel bad about the things that are happening, look at the bright side. You can see it. It's they live. When in group narcissism, says Erich Fromm, the object is not the individual, but the group to which he belongs. The assertion that my country or nation or religion is the most wonderful, the most cultural, the most powerful, the most peace-loving does not sound crazy at all. On the contrary, it sounds like an expression of patriotism, faith, and loyalty. And of course, they help us by cutting it up very, very small for us. Since we have decided not to think for ourselves, and they're doing the thinking for us, they also go, look, we won't get into all the complications. So we will cut it up nice and small for baby to swallow. But a rational man will say, electing mass murderers to commission professional murderers to commit genocide in our name does not mean that we are innocent. David Rockefeller said in his address to the Trilateral Commission, "We are grateful to the Washington Post, New York Times, Time Magazine, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promises of discretion. For almost almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subject to the bright lights of publicity during those years. But the world is now more sophisticated and prepared to march forward to world government. But thank you, you representatives of the people, for keeping quiet and taking our backhanders and doing as you were told. Thank you for serving us and not the people, because we would have been routed out long ago had you not kept silent. If you hadn't handed them the bread, the bread and circuses, and wearing what Paris Hilton is wearing today, and Geraldo and the whole other circus, the Jerry Springers and whatever, the whole lot of it. Thank you, because we could not have operated for 5 seconds without your help. In 2000, in his memoirs, David Rockefeller said, for more than a century, ideological extremists at either end of the political spectrum have seized upon well-publicized incidents, such as my encounter with Castro, to attack the Rockefeller family for inordinate influence they claim we wield over American political and economic institutions. Some even believe that we are part of a secret cabal working against the best interest of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists, and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure, one world, if you will. If that is the charge, I stand guilty, and I'm proud of it. They don't mind telling you. You see, this country has never been a democracy. It's always been an aristocracy. They just don't wear robes and ride down the middle of the street with silk slippers on and a big crown. Because if they did, we were sick of it. You see, when America got started, people knew all that. They thought they were getting away from that. So they kept quiet for about 100 years. Now they're just letting you know. Now they're just saying, okay, we're all through being quiet. Of course, anybody with a brain cell knew that it was an oligarchy, a plutocracy. But most of the people thought, no, it's a democracy. Now they're just telling you, no, it's not. We are royal blood, and we're going to treat you with a contemptuous way. Because you don't tell us what to do. We tell you how it is. And as Jung himself said, one of the greatest intellects that ever graced this planet, Carl Gustav Jung said, the larger a society or confederacy, the greater the amalgamation of collective, remember, as opposed to independence, collective factors, which is typical of every large organization. The more aggravated the moral and spiritual degeneration of the individual. It's very simple. But you've been told. You've had glowing lights in this country who've warned you against it. Says, don't give in. Find your selfhood. Be sovereign. Be strong. Be real. How can you solve the needs of another when you don't even know what your own needs are? How can you live as a slave to the needs and approval of others? Stand up. A person who came from the hells of hells, who saw the worst kind of tyranny in Russia. She said, if one values human life, one cannot value its destroyers. But wait a minute. We know that in a way we can. Haven't we just talked about Freud? And that, you see, there is a pleasure in this destruction. The people who claim to like life do get a kick out of destruction. They are able to do so. That is, the pathological person can. The combined military expenditures of all the world's governments in 1987 were so large that all of the social programs of the United Nations could be financed for 300 years. So don't worry about cleaning up the mess and why is there the world. It's very simple to clean up the problems. You just get rid of the impediment that's stopping it. You don't dream up new ways of doing it. It's because there's an epidemic in our midst, a virus in our midst. There's a vulture at loose. Now, there are 2 books I will mention from the great psychologist Arno Gruen, The Insanity of Normality and The Betrayal of the Self, the fear of autonomy in men and women. And then we have to address this incredible mechanism. In the beginning we said, how is this accomplished? How do they do it? How does the control of the mind, the governmenta, happen? Frank Herbert said, fear is the mind killer. Right from here, Los Angeles, the magician and occultist Manly Palmer Hall said, to repress rebellion is to maintain the status quo, a condition which binds the mortal creature in a state of intellectual or physical slavery. But it is impossible to chain man merely by slaving his body. The mind also must be held, and to accomplish this, fear is the accepted weapon. The common man must fear life, fear death, fear God, fear the devil, and fear most his overlords, the keepers of his destiny. the master-slave. And it begins from the moment that you enter school. The teacher is a slave of somebody else. He's going to treat you like a slave. The false teacher. And of course, not having any security within, that we're a jellyfish within, we're a miasma of mess, then again, in comes the boss, in comes Big Daddy. And they will restore order. Like it says right there, Novus Ordo Seclorum. There will be an order. But what kind of order will it be? It won't be an organic, natural order of discipline and passion you see in reality. No, it'll be the boot stamping in the face of humanity forever, as George Orwell said. We got George Bush fulfilling George Orwell's theories. George Bush Sr. said that if the American people had ever known the truth about what we Bushes have done to this nation, we would be chased down the streets and lynched. He said that straight in an interview in 1992. We have the quote. But that's right. They don't even mind you knowing that it was engineered. But they can engineer it anyway, because it's not just the first one. Because they know that you're going to give up your rights for the security that they bring. You read it, or the world is now reading it politically. I don't give a damn about politics. I'm into psychology. I know what's behind all of that. It's not just done. This is just one more recent, example of what man has done century after century. What everyone is doing, even in their most intimate relationships. This is just on a macro political level. It's affecting and disaffecting America. But it's an old story psychologically. And the state becomes the sole guarantor of our self-preservation. That's basically what it is. And the symbolism alone is alarming because, you see, these guys know how to wear the devil's horns when it's needed. Because he's animus, remember, right? But we got to realize they don't just work on archetypally, in one area. They are composite. They can put on different masks whenever it's needed. They can be the strong father animus figure when they need to be. But they can also play a little bit of the Thanatos for you if that needs to be. And they can even play a little bit of, the devil role for you. But mostly it's animus. Mars, Saturn, the sun, the solar god. But they play with archetypes. Just like, cream floats to the top in milk. Well, in politics, scum is what rises to the top. As William S. Burroughs said, we must all face the fact that our leaders are certifiably insane. Or worse. And I think that last statement is very interesting, or worse, because that ties in with the book, my work in Atlantis. That, I know what worse means. It's not just a matter of simple insanity. We're dealing with off-world presences here. But the idea can be simply stated like this. Vultures and carrion crows, with no disrespect to those animals, don't normally, you find them with a serviette stuck down their neck, seeking their food in a Japanese tea garden, do you? The sewer rat will be found in a sewer. If you find a dead corpse, expect maggots. So when the psychopath is then promoted by us to their positions of authority, they don't feel comfortable stewing in their own mess. Their idea is to make the whole world ambiantly like what they are inside. Immediately. We call it war, and chaos and all sorts of threats. But they feel good about that. Just like you feel good in a beautiful, harmonious place. You've got to realize that these people feel irritated in that kind of situation. They're psychically deranged. These are psychological monsters. They just happen to be in control of the world. And therefore they will then make the world the sea of chaos that makes them feel real good. Because they don't feel, they're not like us. They're not like, maybe these are people who are, affiliated with the alien gene. The Course in Miracles explains it. Having projected his anger onto the world, he sees vengeance about to strike at him. His own attacks thus perceived as self-defense. Because that's the delusion that they buy themselves into. They're not attacking anybody, they're defending themselves. Haven't you seen it in so many movies? If you can convince yourself that somebody's attacking you, then you're justified, aren't you, in your own head? You don't care if you're impeached. You don't care if the whole country throws you out. You're justified even if you end up sleeping on a bridge, on a beach under a bridge. If you put these people there, they're still going to have you the story. They're going to tell you about how they were hard done by. Well, don't we all do the same thing? When we're working for the system and the corporation, when we're given the executive badge, it's a wonderful company. As soon as they give us the sack, then we sit at the bar telling all our mates how horrible it was and how they mistreated us. Then, psychotic as these people are, and this is what really gets me, you see, as psychotic and outrageous and maniacal and murderous as these people are, then they turn to you and go, let's not tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories. Like, these are paragons of reason. These are the saintly ones who are going to tell you, don't think. Don't step back from the canvas and use your own reason. For goodness sake, we don't tolerate any of that. You believe what we tell you. Never forget, your slave, me master.